Hi, I'm Alec from Easier Habits, and I coach entrepreneurs in how to harness the power of good habits to build meaningful and successful businesses. Part two of my market research series. I'm taking a specific example from a business that I will be building, an actual business, and going through my market research process. Now, if you missed the first video, you can go ahead and check that out, link below in the description. And that is where I set up my initial market research plan and go through specific examples of going to a site, evaluating different types of information that I might glean from that site. And so if you want a really detailed hands-on, what should you do at different specific, what should you do on Twitter, what should you do on YouTube, etc., you can see that example from last week. This week, I am quote unquote done. I am talking about what it means to be done, how you know when you're done, what kind of insights I got from my specific project, and what are the next steps. And my hope is that as you go through this process with me, you will have ideas for your own market research. You'll have a better idea of what types of information you can get and how to use it in your business. So how do you know when you're done with market research? Well, for one thing, you're never actually done. You should always be doing some level of market research or keeping up with the news, etc. But you need to know when to switch out from a primarily research phase to an action phase. And for me, that's usually when I found 50 to 100 items. There's nothing magical about that number. It's just the area in which I find that I'm not getting a lot of new information. For example, I've got the top 20, 10 or 20 blogs, 20 or 30 social groups, 10 to 20 YouTube channels, whatever it is. I've already got the top. I can find more channels, but they either are smaller, less recent content, or I'm just seeing more of the same types of content. So for example, on YouTube, there are a lot of people who focus on 3D modeling with Blender. I really didn't need a lot of those. They looked pretty similar. What I needed was just grab the top few within that niche for 3D modeling, and that would cover a lot of what I need in that area. And so you can holistically go by when you're not getting new information, right? When the next social media group isn't really telling you or anything new or having different types of posts, etc. So that's when you're done. And for me, I find 50 to 100 across many different sources usually is enough. And remember, this is like YouTube channels, podcasts, blogs, social network groups. I have a section specifically for questions that are helpful or insightful that give you how potential customers, like what potential customers' concerns are, what their priorities are, what their language is, etc. So that's why I have a question-specific one that I use for individual posts on Quora or Reddit, for example. So yeah, there's lots of different types of content. If you grab the top 10, 20, or usually in case of social groups, 30 groups, then I typically find that coming up with 50 to 100 sources isn't that difficult. And a lot of the time in a project like the one I just did is the learning curve if you're either in a new niche or a niche that's really small, so that you have to kind of zoom out and triangulate between a couple different parent niches. So with no further ado, I'll dive into what the finished market research looks like. So this is my quote unquote finished initial market research. And I do want to clarify that when I've been talking about market research, I've really been meaning initial market research, i.e. exposure into the market. Who are the big movers and shakers, influencers, products, what kind of conversations are people having about those things? Where are they having the conversations? What are the people's needs? What are unmet needs? Getting a sense of what is in the market and what the opportunities are. Now, once you have done this, what you have is a much more specific basis to go on to very narrow focused research. So you might research competitors and do a competitive analysis, and that is a narrower form of market research. You might do user testing with mockups or MVPs, and again, to some extent, you are gauging the potential interest in the market for this product, just using a focus group or a small set of people that you're testing with as a proxy for the market. So you could think of those as market research, but I'm excluding those here. This is just initial exposure to the market. I have here a bunch of
keywords and phrases. I didn't really use VR painting, but I added a bunch to this list that I have tried out in these various tabs. As you can see, I do have a bunch of products. I really have focused mostly on the 3D modeling products, at least here. In terms of video, since YouTube is the giant of videos, you could also think about the YouTube tab here specifically as a different product for my idea of a YouTube channel, right? Those would be potentially competing channels and competing products. But I did list here too a few markets where people sell graphic work, including computer graphics artists selling 3D modeling, etc. I didn't really go deep into that, but I did at least want to check that out. This is kind of a shotgun approach to the market research. There were a lot of subtopics here, and part of my purpose was figuring out where I want to narrow my niche to. Social is always one of the biggest tabs. It's where you will get a lot of feedback from people on the existing products. And so I moved my Reddit tab into here, except for specific questions that I wanted to keep note of in a questions tab. And then I covered like Facebook and Twitter. What I haven't done yet is Discord, and I really should do that. So soon. I still have a few to-dos. Here's the YouTube channels. And this is where I noticed the splitting of the niches. For example, I could find, if I'm searching for 3D modeling, a lot of people doing fairly big channels, you know, the hundreds of thousands of followers uh, for 3D modeling, but specifically usually in Blender, sometimes Blender and ZBrush. And so I got a few of the bigger channels and kind of noted that it's similar content. And that is one of the good signals when, for instance, you can stop examining or searching for a keyword is if you're just getting the same types of information again. The biggest surprise here was actually that the biggest virtual reality channel, I haven't clicked it here, with 3.41 million views, doesn't even have a single video. It's just an aggregation channel for other quality VR videos. And so either the market for VR videos is much larger than I think, or my theory or my hypothesis that if you create a quality VR video that is still, or a video about VR that still works effectively in 2D, you'll still get a lot of viewers. It's just, as long as you just have that, again, quality experience. So we will test that hypothesis in potentially if we go with the YouTube channel. All right, questions. I'll talk more about the insights I got from this. As you can see, I filled out a few notes kind of in this spirit of once you start getting the same information over and over again, then you can slow down. I added a bunch of questions that eventually over time I'll add a few additional notes to, but a lot of them are just how do I get better at 3D modeling? And I think there's an art side of that that's hard, but I think there's also a lot of technical reasons for why that's hard. And what this did is validate the idea that more exposure to how people sculpt, like live sculpting, or apps, etc., that make 3D modeling easier, or a market that makes it really easy to connect with creators that you love their work, and so that you can decide maybe you're not going to focus on 3D modeling, right? All of those things potentially could fill this very big unmet need. Blogs slash websites, I guess, in this case. This was a smaller set. It was hard to find blogs devoted specifically to this stuff, partially because I think it's a visual medium. So you could find some YouTube channels devoted to VR. Fewer blogs. There's a few of them. I did find one, I think this one. No, I forget. There's one of the blogs, and maybe I didn't even put up here because it wasn't primarily VR related, but it did list popular resources for computer graphic artists, of which 3D modelers and VR artists would be a subset. And so it gave a list of some of these. And if you can find that in bigger niches, for instance, if I'm exploring like TESOL, which is a very established niche, teaching English as a second language or teaching English as a foreign language, you're going to have a lot of blogs on that, and a lot of blogs offering you, the top 10 or 100 blogs of 2022. That's a bigger, more established niche. As I kind of realized from searching this, 3D VR environment modeling, super niche. So That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means I'm not going to get a lot of blogs, and probably I'm going to try and court one of those crowds specifically. So podcasts. So I found a few. I really wanted to find more on Apple Podcasts because they actually give a sense of both rating, if the podcast had enough viewers rating it, and the popularity. And I think I used by the popularity of specific episodes. So I kind of picked the highest episode I saw of the podcast. Um, and having that data is helpful. However, what I found on Apple Podcasts was a lot of the podcasts were actually out of date. I found a lot more on Spotify, and I wish Spotify had some metric to show me how popular these podcasts are. But I think actually the two things might be related, i.e., Spotify, because it doesn't have those ratings or popularity uh, indicators that iTunes does, is a ripe field for newcomers to come in and they can gain traction if they have really good content, whereas established old shows with higher ratings get higher rankings on iTunes. So, for what it's worth, if you're searching with podcasts, that's what I found out. And then as I was doing it, even some of the old defunct podcasts on iTunes, for example, just scanning it, there were some interesting pieces. For example, in one of the episodes, there's Nathan, probably Rowe with an E. He's the creator of Sculptor VR. He no longer works there, but he's giving his reasons for having created that app, which aligns very strongly or informs very strongly any potential thought that I might have around an app. And actually, one of the things he wanted is to create a volume rather than paint based art program so that potentially what you create in it could be 3D printed. So it kind of comes back to that big 3D printer. I have some potential sculptors to reach out to. And then people in conferences, I didn't really lean into that. People I will fill out more as I engage, for instance, with social groups. I will see who they're talking about or who in the social group is talking the most. I'll start adding more people to that. Conferences was helpful because I did find a couple interesting potential people to look up from that later, but I'm not heavily focused on that, at least at the moment. And then I had a few notes. So I hope this has been helpful. If you haven't seen Market Research Part 1, you might want to check that out because I actually go onto the different sites and fill out a line or two in each of the tabs to give you an idea of what I'm looking for and how I'm choosing the resources I'm throwing in here. I'm not super picky. This is I want a big buffet, and then I can narrow it down as I go through the content based on what is most helpful for the particular business model I pick. And as I pick up additional nuances beyond just how many followers a group has and do they have recent content, I might adjust the ranking and sort them according to that.
So, what did I learn from my market research? Well, there was the broadening out, learning how to find the different niches, right? Coordinate between VR or drilling down between a particular VR headset like the Quest, which creates a lot of popular groups, or specific software, ideally, usually artistic or sculpting software, because that's really close to my niche. Also, occasionally zooming out to phrases like 3D modeling without VR, because that has an overlap, and a lot of, for instance, 3D modeling channels on YouTube will at least have one episode where they've tried out some sort of VR thing, and or they're 3D modeling for VR even if they're not doing it in VR. So that was an area where I got some additional traction. And the last area where I got some traction was looking CGA or computer graphic artists. So that is specifically looking for artists of the type that might do 3D modeling for special effects or games, and therefore might be interested in some of this technology. One of the biggest keywords that I discovered was 3D printing. I hadn't really thought a lot about 3D printing, but for example, when I went into Reddit, as compared to the various like virtual reality groups that had, as many as a couple 100,000, the 3D printing group on Reddit was over 1 million. So that let me know that on my array of business ideas, right, I had a YouTube channel for live sculpting fantasy environments. I thought about a marketplace where people could buy custom created 3D models. I thought about helping put out courses, working with a 3D sculptor to put out a course. And then lastly, maybe building up to my ideal software, something that could handle 3D environment building in a virtual reality in a way that felt more intuitive and quick and easy than the current 2D or virtual reality models. So those were the different business models I thought. There wasn't 3D printing anywhere in them. So for example, we could, in our YouTube channel, when we're creating environments from authors' scenes, one thing we could do is figure out how to either take what we used in the video or do a little cleanup after the video and create a 3D printable model of that. And we could sell the plans for the 3D printable model and do some kind of revenue share with the author or whatnot. That could be an example, and we could create our own marketplace of 3D printable models that we've done. And again, like licensing with the author, some kind of arrangement with the author. But that would make the business model that much more effective. We could borrow an author's audience, right? Because they would be coming to the video. We could offer the author a new income stream as some part of some revenue share of this. Plus, in addition to whatever like affiliate marketing that we do with the channel itself, that gives us another income stream. So that actually could be a really good business. And that could turn in, like that marketplace could turn into also a place where then we expand that by adding the bespoke, I forget what you call it, when you ask for a custom work for an artist. Anyway, brains fried. But anyway, so the 3D printing could fit into that. It could fit into the marketplace idea. It segues into a number of things. And it's another thing to think of for the app, for example, or for the course. Maybe the course could be specifically not just 3D sculpting in VR, but how to 3D sculpt in VR for 3D printing, right? So that is a whole nother level of business models that I was ignoring that I discovered doing the market research as my eyes were opened up to bigger opportunities in this space. The last thing that I will discuss, I learned plenty more, but I want to keep this video somewhat short. The last thing that I learned was from the questions. So one, there was a huge section of questions about how to learn 3D modeling, which signals that there's desire to learn it and that people find it difficult. So that's perfect for the course and the intuitive app idea, or like the specialized app for environment building. That would be perfect. And so that kind of established that market. But the other thing that was interesting that gave a lot more nuance to the idea specifically of an app market were the questions around, would 3D modeling on VR replace current 3D modeling programs like Blender on the screen? And a lot of professionals said no, but they said no in a way that I think validates my concept, which is interesting. So there are some constraints that I already know that I'm going to have to live with, like the barfiness. Most people can't do VR for more than 60 or 90 minutes without feeling a little queasy. And that there's not a lot I can do about that except for designing around that constraint. So that's true. Another thing they pointed out is that the mouse is more precise, and it's, a quick movement with the mouse is less energy and quicker than a sweeping gesture with the hands, waving them around. And that is true, but it is also true that the effectiveness of the gesture depends on what you do with it. And there are definitely ways that if you programmed your software correctly, you could make a wave of the hand, for instance. You could use it to scatter and randomize an object that you have with certain customizable dimensions. So for instance, you maybe have a base tree and you're creating a forest, so you want to scatter them over an area and vary the height and color of the trees within certain conditions, right? So if you could do that with a wave of your hand, then all of a sudden, point and click with a mouse in terms of like copying and paste, with your left hand with the keyboard shortcuts that are so quick. And then, poking where you want the tree to go with the mouse, like it doesn't necessarily look all that efficient. The particular nuance I got was when professionals were saying that you would never replace Blender because Blender is easy. It has keyboard shortcuts and I forget other workflow helps, and that was to me was just illustrating actually the need for intuitive UI. So yes, there are some keyboard shortcut conventions. There are some, just like there are emerging VR gesture conventions. But any program I've seen, any creative program I've seen beyond like very basic paint programs, they have dozens and dozens of people posting cheat sheets for their shortcuts online. Now, you wouldn't do that if shortcuts were actually easy and intuitive, right? To understand a shortcut, you actually have to understand how the program works, and then memorize a list of arcane and sometimes very arbitrary feeling letter combinations. Was that an alt or a control? And why is that one V? I don't get it. V is not even in the word for the tool's name. Like, you could. So anyway, that stuff isn't intuitive. Those are all the comments from people who are professionals, power users who have a particular workflow. And of course, they're invested in that workflow. To them, that's easy. But to everybody else, that's hard. And the fact that professionals don't even realize how hard their software is to use really says something about the need for an alternative to turn things on its head. And so that clarified to me in my market research that what I'm looking for is an easy and quick alternative, and probably my target audience would be hobbyists, people new to the field, and I could get them using it, I could get them thinking in a new way. And then, once I took a step down that path, I could evaluate whether there was the potential to compete at the professional level with people who began their 3D modeling journal in VR, right, and are open to new ways of thinking, or whether indeed, as professionals seem to claim, that it will never be replaced, or it will not be replaced anytime soon. So I think there really is that market for the people who want to learn 3D modeling, are finding it hard, definitely not geared towards power users. Although, 3D gurus and other programs will have a lot to teach me about what it means to 3D model, and I will have a lot to learn from them. They won't be necessarily my target audience. So what's the next step? The next step is choosing a business model. I think I could go forward with any of these from just a pure feasibility. There is desire for all of these. I haven't really as much validated specifically the marketplace, but there are already people selling 3D modeling skills on marketplaces, so I'm pretty sure that is a market, and I'm also pretty sure there isn't a marketplace specifically for that. They're on places like Fiverr or ArtStation that are more general services or art platforms. So I think any of them could be successful, and there's a new potential one, which is 3D printing. What I'm going to focus on, though, is the YouTube channel, right? I don't have to create new tech or apps or even a new website. I can use existing technologies, and really the entrepreneurship there is just introducing 3D modeling to a new audience in a way that engages them. So it's the entrepreneurship of finding new markets. And that is usually one of the quicker ways to start a new venture. Plus, once I've done that, I will then have a platform to advertise potential courses or apps or websites to. So what I need to do now is do a second finer pass specifically for my YouTube project. Fill out things that I haven't filled out specifically for that, like a list of fantasy authors and their socials. That will be a new tab. And then also the existing sources that I have, I might rank them for the needs of this project, like rank them for my ability to find potential sculpting partners or places to potentially advertise my channel to in order to get some of those initial views. So this is the end of my major market research phase. It's not that I'm going to stop doing market research, but this is the end of my formal series, and I'll just kind of update my docs and tweak them as I go. So I hope this has been helpful for you as you build your business or think about building a business to figure out that step of market research. I know it can be big and overwhelming, but if you do this step by step, source by source, within a few hours, you can get a pretty good idea of what are the opportunities in your space and what you are ready to work on. So if this has been helpful, please subscribe to keep following me along in my journey. I just love that I can actually, as a coach, go along and build a business with you. It's a thrilling opportunity. And of course, if this has been helpful, you can also like it. That will help other entrepreneurs find this video and get help with their market research. So thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions or comments or your own market research hacks or tips, go ahead and put them in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. And of course, until next week, make big changes, one small habit at a time.